Hello and welcome to the bottom movies I saw in theaters for 2015. Now, normally this will be the bottom 12 movies I saw, but as I said before, I only got around to seeing like 30 or 40 movies, and to cut them up into 12 movies would basically be, I'd cut the list in half and put one on one side, one on the other. I didn't want to quite do that, so I'm narrowing this down to the bottom 5 movies that I saw for this year. Now, you may be saying, as I mentioned the names on this list, you may be saying, oh, come on, this movie was worse than that. But remember, this is what I personally saw in theaters this year. So that's the only movies I can grade on this. So if it's not necessarily saying these were the worst movies of the year, it's just out of what I saw, these ones are the ones that I liked the least. Again, not saying they're bad movies, it's just these are the bottom as far as my rating, if I was going to rate where they fell into what I would watch versus what I wouldn't. And now, again, I want to mention this is not going to reflect the star ratings that I gave these, because those are their own kind of thing, and this is just kind of going off of how memorable was this movie for me, and did I like it more or less than another movie. So that's how this works. So again, don't freak out and start sending me a bunch of comments about, oh, you're stupid, this movie was so much worse than this. That's what I got to see. By all means, if you want to leave comments, let me know what you thought the worst movies or the bottom movies of the year were. There's a comment section right down there. Feel free to do it. But like I said, this is just based on what I got to see in the theater. That's all. So before we start this list, I do need to make one honorable mention. This is probably the worst movie I've seen all year, and it definitely deserves to be on the bottom list. However, there's one small reason it's not going to be on this list, and why it's going to get an honorable mention instead. And that is Santa Claus and the Ice Cream Bunny. Now, this movie is god-awful, but the reason it's not going to make it onto my bottom list, other than an honorable mention, is strictly because I saw it as a riff tracks. I knew what it was going to be going into it. Yeah, the riff didn't really make it any better, although I did laugh my ass off. The movie was still god-awful, and it should be on this list, but because it's a riff tracks, it won't. So that's just a quick honorable mention. The riff tracks is great. The movie itself was shit, and that's why Santa Claus and the Ice Cream Bunny gets an honorable mention on the bottom 5 movies I saw of 2015. Number 5 on my list for the bottom 5 movies of this year, which I have written down on this little piece of paper here. Number 5 goes to The Good Dinosaur. Now you may be saying, hey, you gave that movie a positive review. You said you liked it. I did, but the thing with The Good Dinosaur is it's every other Pixar movie I've already seen. It's just, here's this dinosaur, and unfortunately, that's kind of the review I've been seeing from everybody, is Pixar finally has a flop on their hands, and it's The Good Dinosaur. But honestly, like, a lot of people didn't like Cars, and it's because, it's the same Pixar story, and it's just anthropomorphic cars. And now it's kind of like, oh, here's the story again. It's a story we've seen. Not a bad story, just, based on some of their other stuff, it didn't quite jerk at your heartstrings the way other things do. Like, all 4 Toy Stories, or however many Toy Stories there are, now all 3 of them, I guess, with a 4th one on the way, have basically told the exact same story. However, each time they do something different in the story to, even though you're watching the exact same film, it plays differently on your emotions and makes you tap into different parts of your personal being. And that's why the Toy Story films are successful. Where with The Good Dinosaur, it's just like, oh yeah, that stuff we push out every couple of years? Oh, here's another one. And this time it's got a dinosaur. So that's why The Good Dinosaur falls at number 5 on this list. Number 4. So the number 4 film on my list is actually a very fitting spot, because it goes to The Fantastic Four. Again, as I said in the review for The Fantastic Four, I didn't dislike the movie as much as it just didn't need to be here. you're telling us a different story about the Fantastic Four than the one we've already seen. Okay, fine, I get that. But you didn't really tell us the story of the Fantastic Four. You told us a story leading up to the Fantastic Four, and then the Fantastic Four appear, and it was the end of the movie. It's an origin story, but origin stories still lead into more, and I felt like this just kind of fell flat, which seems to be the same, which everyone seems to dislike the film, but I don't think for the same reasons that I dislike it. But at the same time, I had fun watching it, so that's why it's only ranked number 4 and not number 1 or 2 on this list. So had this still been a top 12 list, this one probably would have been still like around an 11. But since it's not a top 12 and it's just a top 5, that's why Fantastic Four takes the number 4 spot on the list of 5 worst movies I saw in theaters this year. Number 3. So the number 3 spot on my list of top 5, or bottom 5 movies I saw this year goes to a movie that I'm only placing this on this list because I expected so much more out of it. Again, I had fun with this movie, but I just felt it could have been so much better, and that goes to Pixels. If you watch my review of Pixels, you already know the things I didn't like about this movie versus what I did like about it. There was just too much of the dislikes that it outweighed the likes of this movie, and that's why Pixels lands at number 3 on the list of bottom 5 movies I saw in the theater this year. Number 2. So number 2 on this list was kind of hard for me to pick. Again, this isn't a bad movie. It was a bottom 12 list. It probably wouldn't even be on the list, but then again, it might, but it'd probably be real low on the list. Versus being in the number 2 position that it currently is, and that goes to Crimson Peak. The reason this is on the list, like I said, is not a bad film. It's beautifully shot and everything. My main problem with this movie is that it just takes so long to get anywhere. I've heard someone describe it as being a slow burn movie, which Del Toro is known for, and that's exactly it. It takes so long to get anywhere in this movie that by the time you get there, you kind of forget where you are going, and then the resolution at the end doesn't even resolve anything. It just kind of goes off on a separate tangent, and yeah, the movie had some problems, but again, it's a beautiful movie. It was a fun watch. It's a slow burn, and that's why it ranks at number 2 on the list of the bottom 5 movies I saw in theaters in 2015. Number 1. Alright, and here we are at the number 1 spot. So I really had to think about what I wanted to have in this one, and it ultimately won out because it's pretty much a movie that didn't need to exist, and I really had to decide if I wanted to put this here or in a different spot. Ultimately, it won out here because I needed something to top the list, and out of the handful of ones I had, this one was the one that fit this position the best, and I'll explain that more in the next video. But the number 1 spot for the bottom movies I saw in 2015 goes to The Maze Runner, Scorch Trials. Again, it's only here because the movie didn't need to exist. It's basically let's move all our characters from this place that they're at now to this other place so we can set up the rest of the story, and in the meantime we'll have a couple of things shift around so it makes more sense when these characters are on different sides from each other. It's a movie that didn't need to exist, but it does because it's part of the book series and it's needed to continue these sequels. So that's really the only reason, and the main reason it ends up at number 1 on the list of bottom movies I saw. And for those of you wondering, well, that doesn't sound as bad compared to some of the others. Honestly, when I looked at these, I kind of agree with that, but when I looked at these 5, because I just kind of picked, okay, what ones am I going to put on the list, and then I go through and put them in the order that I'm going to put them at. And out of the 5 that I had, or 6 with the ice cream bunny, as I'm picking the order of which ones did I like more than the others, this is just the order it fell in, and Scorched Trials just happened to fit perfectly in at number 1, just because of the pure unneededness of it. It goes above Crimson Peak, which was just on there because of the slow burn. Unnecessariness goes above Pixels, which just could have been better. It goes above Fantastic Four, which, again, didn't need to be made, but I understood why it was made. It just could have taken a better route. And it goes far above Good Dinosaur, where it's a rehashing of the same story. This, Scorched Trials just honestly just didn't need to be made. But I understand why it was made, so I give it some slack for that. But that's why it's number 1 on my list of bottom 5 movies I saw in theaters for 2015. So that is it for our bottom 5 list. I will be back shortly with another video. However, it's not the top 5 yet. And yes, the other one will be a top 5. Might as well let that out of the bag now, because obviously I'm going to say the same thing at the beginning of that one. I couldn't do a 12, so I did a 5. But because I couldn't do a 12, I'm giving you not just 1, but 2 bonus lists, one of which you probably already saw before this one, which was what I didn't get to see. And the next one coming up, well, you'll just have to wait and see what it is. But there will be another list, and it will be coming soon. So until then, stay tuned. Remember to like, comment, rate, and subscribe, and share the video. And until next time, thanks for watching.